Imagine, you are deep in the wilderness, after 3 days of relentless, exhausting trekking, and you have just brought down a massive primeval stag. Your tribe is ecstatic. The fires are roaring, and everyone eats until their bellies are full. But the kill is too massive. Hundreds of pounds of dark, protein-dense muscle remain. Then, the air turns warm. The humidity rises, because the warm air brings the first invisible force, bacterial replication. At this temperature, pathogens like salmonella undergo binary fission every 20 minutes. In less than 10 hours, a single microbe becomes a billion toxic clones, rotting your prize. Long before humans understood biology, they knew that warm air possessed a lethal magic, and this brought the second force, the harsh prison of the nomadic lifestyle. Without a way to keep meat cold, hunter-gatherers were trapped in a permanent cycle of immediate consumption. They could never stay in one place for long. This brings us to the third invisible force, the brutal laws of thermodynamics. For thousands of years, survival depended on outsmarting heat. Our ancestors quickly learned that to stop the invisible monsters, they had to strip away what bacteria needed most, moisture and warmth. They sliced meat into thin strips, hanging it under the scorching sun to dry into rock-hard jerky. They discovered white gold salt, using it to painfully dehydrate the flesh, drawing out water through osmotic pressure. In colder regions, they dug deep into the frozen earth, creating primitive ice cellars lined with river ice. But every single one of these solutions required immense, exhausting labor. You were either constantly hunting, constantly boiling seawater for salt, or digging through frozen mud. Humanity was locked in a grueling, endless war against invisible decay, until we finally figured out how to trap winter inside a small domestic box. The modern refrigerator did not just change what we eat, it changed how many of us stay alive. In the early 20th century, before mechanical refrigeration became standard, thousands of infants died every single summer from what doctors called summer diarrhea, which was actually just milk and food rotting in the heat. The moment artificial cold entered the average home, infant mortality rates plummeted globally. Cities grew larger, food supply chains stretched across entire continents, and the fear of seasonal starvation vanished. We successfully tamed the invisible rot that hunted our ancestors for millennia. Yet today, you look at this metal machine and only feel annoyed when it hums too loudly, or when you run out of ice. Every single cold drink in your hand is a direct victory over the brutal laws of evolution. We trapped winter in a box, and in doing so, we finally escaped the primitive trap of survival. Before modern electricity could freeze a drop of water, humanity built a multi-million-dollar global empire out of pure natural winter. In the early 1800s, an ambitious entrepreneur named Frederick Tudor looked at the frozen lakes of New England and saw a gold mine. People laughed at him. They called him the Ice King as a joke, mockingly asking how he expected to ship frozen blocks across the equator without them turning into warm puddles. But Tudor discovered a secret weapon hidden in the debris of lumber mills, sawdust. By tightly packing frozen lake ice into double-walled wooden ships and burying it under mountains of dry sawdust, he created the world's first efficient thermal insulation. The ice didn't melt. It survived a grueling, weeks-long voyage through tropical heat all the way to the Caribbean, South America, and even India. For the first time in human history, wealthy elites living in the sweltering heat of Calcutta could put a solid cube of Massachusetts winter into their drinks. The joke was over. The global ice trade was born, and it completely revolutionized human society. Once the river winter was safely locked inside the massive commercial ice houses, it needed to be distributed to millions of growing urban homes. This demand birthed a beautiful new domestic technology, the classic icebox. These were heavy wooden cabinets, lined with thick layers of tin, zinc, and cork insulation, with a special top compartment, reserved exclusively for a block of real ice. Suddenly, the kitchen layout changed forever, shifting from a simple hearth to a high-tech preservation station. To keep these domestic boxes running, a new army of workers appeared on the city streets, the iconic Icemen. Driving heavy horse-drawn wagons stacked with melting blocks, they carried massive chunks of ice directly up flights of stairs on their bare shoulders. Housewives would place a special cardboard card in their window showing the exact weight of ice they needed for the day. For nearly a century, the survival of entire modern cities completely depended on this fragile, daily race against the summer sun. But the golden age of the Ice Kings was running on borrowed time. By the late 19th century, the Industrial Revolution was roaring at full steam, permanently poisoning the environment. The very rivers and lakes that provided the world's ice became dumping grounds for toxic factory waste and sewage. Suddenly, the pristine, crystal-clear winter blocks turned into invisible biological weapons. Headlines screamed about poison ice as thousands of people contracted typhoid and cholera directly from their kitchen iceboxes. The multi-million-dollar trade was facing a catastrophic existential crisis. The natural supply was dead. Humanity could no longer trust nature to keep its food safe. Inventors around the globe entered a desperate, high-stakes race to create an artificial mechanical miracle, a machine that could generate pure, clean ice on demand, regardless of the weather outside. The savior of the story wasn't a corporate tycoon, but a desperate doctor named John Gorey working in the sweltering heat of Florida. In the 1840s, Gorey was treating patients suffering from deadly outbreaks of yellow fever and malaria. The hospital rooms were like ovens, and Gorey became convinced that the key to curing his patients lay in cooling the ambient air. He started hungrily hanging ice imported from the north in basins from the ceiling, but the supply was too expensive and completely unreliable. Driven by medical necessity, Gorey built a groundbreaking mechanical pump that compressed air, cooled it with water, and then expanded it to drop the temperature. In 1851, he successfully patented the world's first commercial machine designed specifically to manufacture artificial ice. Gorey had officially cracked the code of thermodynamics, proving that humanity could finally manufacture its own winter on demand. By the early 1920s, the dream of mechanical cold finally stepped out of commercial factories and directly into domestic kitchens. But the first true home refrigerators were not the friendly, harmless appliances we know today. They were quiet, ticking chemical time bombs. To manufacture artificial cold, these early machines relied on primitive, highly volatile toxic gases like sulfur dioxide, methyl chloride, and ammonia. The compressor pumps were loud, heavy iron monsters installed in the basement or on top of the wooden cabinet, constantly vibrating under intense pressure. Because sealing technology was deeply primitive, micro cracks in the copper pipes were a frequent, terrifying reality. A single nocturnal leak of sulfur dioxide meant that a sleeping family would inhale lethal fumes, causing sudden suffocation and death in their beds. Newspapers that once warned about poison ice now carried horrific stories of entire households killed by their own kitchen appliances. Buying a refrigerator in 1925 wasn't just a financial investment, it was a high-stakes gamble with your family's lives. This deadly chemical crisis caught the attention of the most famous scientist on Earth, Albert Einstein. In 1926, while living in Berlin, Einstein read a horrific newspaper report about an entire family, including young children, who suffocated in their sleep when a refrigerator seal broke. Deeply moved and horrified by this preventable tragedy, he turned to his brilliant former student, Leo Szilard, and said they had to find a better way. Together, they abandoned theoretical physics for a moment to become practical appliance engineers. Einstein and Szilard spent years designing a radical new type of refrigerator that completely eliminated the mechanical pump. Their revolutionary invention had zero moving parts, required no electricity, and operated using only a tiny heat source like a gas flame. By using a clever mixture of butane, ammonia, and water, their machine relied entirely on shifting vapor pressures to create a silent, perfectly safe cooling cycle. They successfully patented the design in 1930, proving that even the laws of quantum physics could bow to the urgent need for safe human survival. Despite its brilliant safety, Einstein's design lost the corporate war to a massive industrial breakthrough. In 1928, a chemist working for General Motors and DuPont synthesized a miraculous new synthetic gas called Freon. To prove its total safety to a skeptical public, the inventor literally inhaled a deep breath of Freon during a live press conference and gently blew out a candle. It was non-toxic, non-flammable, and incredibly efficient, instantly eliminating the threat of household chemical poisoning. With the safety crisis solved, refrigerator production exploded into the millions, turning the appliance into a standard American kitchen icon. But this corporate triumph hit a slow-motion global catastrophe. Decades later, scientists discovered that the millions of tons of Freon leaking into the atmosphere were violently destroying Earth's ozone layer. The very machine that saved families inside their homes had accidentally opened a giant, dangerous hole in the protective shield of the entire planet. Humanity stood at a critical crossroads, but for the first time in history, the entire world actually united to heal the skies, signing global treaties to completely ban dangerous Freon. Today, modern refrigerators use safe, eco-friendly cooling agents, running silently in the background of our lives as the unsung champions of human civilization. Look closely at your kitchen appliance. It is no longer just a cold box. It is a time machine that liberated humanity from the grueling daily struggle for food survival. It single-handedly built the global food network, birthed the modern mega-supermarket, and completely redefined urban geography by allowing cities to grow miles away from farmlands. Every single time you open that door to grab a fresh drink or a midnight snack, you are actively interacting with a hard-fought marvel of human history. The refrigerator transformed how we live, how we eat, and how we survive, proving that the ultimate metric of human progress is often quietly hums in the corner of your room.